Oh, really? Or you want to? That's adorable. Oh.
Check. Test. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's fine. We'll get you. I can talk loud. I'll try not to talk too loud. So we are in the book of Jonah. We are going to be walking through this prophet's life. It's a fascinating story, and like last week we talked about, it's because we don't normally talk about Jonah. He's not, or we think we know everything there is to know. That's why we don't talk about it. We think, oh, Jonah's a simple book, we tell it to our kids, so we know it now. But we're instead going to be walking through, last week we looked at verses 1 and 2, and this week we're going to plow through another whole verse. And so, but before we get into the actual book itself, I want to ask you, where is your paradise? You could be anywhere that would be the perfect place for you. What would it be? Would it be warm, sandy beaches swimming with the fish? For me, that was, Amber's not in here right now, and so I can talk about it a little bit more because she got really upset with me. But on our cruise, I was able to go out onto the beach, and I went with her two brothers and Josiah's wife, also Amber, and we went swimming and snorkel. He had a snorkel mask, and so we were able to see the fish, and it was gorgeous and wonderful. And Amber got really upset because she wasn't there. But she had a spa day, so I will not, she can't hold that against me. Or she shouldn't, but she still does. Or, you know, some people is like, oh, the warm sandy beaches, that's where they want to be. But for me, honestly, the place that I love, the place I think is probably the most beautiful place I've ever been to, was Alaska. On the, I know, right, the interchannel, right where, you know how it comes down and we sort of have all this land on the, you know, west side of Canada. It's this gorgeous place, and I didn't know that these existed, but it's a temperate rainforest. So everything in the middle of summer is green and lush and gorgeous. And the mountains are weird because glaciers they're young mountains. So the tallest ones are pointed. But a glacier came through and ripped all of the mountains, all the peaks away on the lower mountains, so they're also rounded on the lower elevations. So there's this weird mix of like you're standing in what looks like the Rockies, but at some point the Appalachians are all around you. So it's just really, really cool that you have this kind of both and it's gorgeous and just a beautiful area. Or maybe for you, like the green hills of Italy, olive groves and vineyards all around, ancient and modern buildings spotting across the landscape and nestled amongst the natural beauty of Italy itself. And maybe Rome with its monuments built by the ancient Romans and now mixed in with our modern day technology. Whatever that is for you, think about what is your paradise. Where is the place that you would love to be more than anything? And the reason why I want you to think about that for you, whatever that is for you, is because when we think about these beautiful places, it's one of these things, one of the common thoughts is that is where God is. God is in these beautiful places. The joke whenever you move anywhere, and I've seen this a couple different times, it's welcome to God's country. And the South claim that. I know I've been told, why don't you come back where God really lives. Minnesotans claim that, but I don't believe that a frozen tundra is the best. No offense. No offense to Minnesotans in the room. No one here claimed that, but I don't know if that's like, we're sorry that we're Midwest and we're cold and snowy, or if that's just, you assume that, of course, everyone knows this really is God's country. I mean, Notre Dame is right down the road. How could it not be? But good on you for not having claimed that when we moved in. In my own life, when I saw what it means when people say this is God's country, when I visited the mountains of North Carolina. We went hiking with some friends, and we went hiking, and when we got to the top of the mountain and we're looking across this landscape, we could see Appalachia, the mountains across for miles and miles and miles. The sun is setting as we look out across them. And in the valley below us, there was a river full of life and bursting at the seams. However, this river was made out of asphalt. The fish that swam up and down, dots from our vantage point, were cars filled with passengers. On either side, tributaries flowed in as people moved back and forth. It was this thick, grand, just absolutely packed in. Everybody was in this one spot. They couldn't go up the mountains anymore for fear of, just the devastation it would cause. But down, there's just one long train of humans that lived in the valley below. And then when we looked out, we see this thick, lush carpet of trees all around us and covering the mountains. But it's like someone had ripped that up and replaced it instead with this ugly, mismatched padding that sticks up underneath this carpet of trees. Where, you know how when you have the padding underneath your carpet, it's all bits and pieces of foam stuck together? It was like that, because the buildings were all jumbled in together. So you see God's country, and you see what humans do to it. You see paradise and where humans have been. And you think, and I thought to myself, God is there. God's in the business of making the trees grow. God's in the business of making the mountains go on for miles. God's in the sun-kissed sky. And then humans, and I said this to my friends, like humans mucked it all up, didn't we? We come in and we destroy the beautiful trees and the beautiful landscape. We create this asphalt river and we flow through the valleys. We ruined God's paradise. And at this point, we're going to go into the book of Jonah. We're going to see someone try and book a trip to paradise. So let's go to our text. So Jonah chapter 1. If you're not there, go ahead and turn there. You're going to want to read along with us. Jonah chapter 1, and we're going to be in verse 3. And that's all we're going to do today. And I promise at some point we'll go faster. But these first ones set the stage, set the story. And when we understand what's going on in verses 1, 2, and 3, it makes the other ones make a lot more sense. Because we don't always know the background. Everybody that reads Jonah goes, oh, I know what's happening here. And we have to take a little bit more time to pick it apart and understand what's going on. So let's read our text today. Jonah chapter 1, verse 3. However, Jonah got up. So, let's stop real fast. What happened last week? What happened last week was Jonah was told, go to Nineveh. Go to Nineveh. And they said, okay, I don't want to do that. So, however, Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down into it to go with him to Tarshish from the Lord's presence, or away from the Lord's presence. So, last week we remembered that the Jews have a calling to be a blessing. A calling that Abraham had and that his descendants have, where it says, I will bless you and you will be a blessing. Blessed to be a blessing, to spread this message out. The implicit call for all Jews was to give God's Torah commands to the nations. And Jonah himself was specifically called to preach to Nineveh, this dangerous city full of dangerous people, putting Jonah's life in real and present danger. And so when it says Jonah, however, he knew he was disobeying God. This is not going to be good. Think of the number of times, the number of people in Scripture who directly disobeyed God and then everything was hunky-dory. Go through, think about it. Who disobeyed God and then everything turned out nice and wonderful for them? The number is very, very low. I was thinking, could I name any? I mean, some are struck dead at the moment of sinning, like Ananias and Sapphira. They're coming up and they say, oh, we want to do what this guy did. Barnabas, he sells all his possessions and he gives all of his money, all the proceeds to the church. Which is very interesting. He didn't have to do that, but he chose to do it. And so then they did this, wanted to have, and Barnabas became this huge influential leader. He was the son of encouragement. And so people loved him, loved Barnabas, and they wanted that too. And so they kept back some of the money. They said, we're going to sit on these things. They didn't have to. They didn't have to turn anything over. It wasn't a command from the Lord, but they were trying to get the same acclaim and glory without doing the same amount of work. And they said, you lied to us. You're destroying the fabric of what it means to be a part of this community. And you're not, you could have kept it. You didn't have to tell us that you gave everything. You could have kept as much as you wanted, but you are trying for the glory, and then it ends up in death for them. Others are punished in different ways for their sins. One that's weird for us, and I will mention, but I won't try to explain, is that when David sinned by adultery and murder, what happened to him? How was he punished? His child died. The child that he was going to have with Uriah's wife, with Bathsheba, died. First, that doesn't seem fair, does it? But yet, that is how God punished him. And David knows that. There are moments where sin isn't punished right away, like Herod and the murder of innocents at the birth of Jesus. But those moments come with terrible judgment later. The call of Herod and what would happen to him and how history has remembered him shows that judgment happens later. Jonah knows that he's doing the wrong thing. And that was a bit of his point. He wanted to do the wrong thing. He knew where he wanted to go. He'd rather go to paradise. Because Tarshish isn't near Gath-Hepher. Tarshish isn't close by. So I want to show you a map. Okay, so this is where Joppa is. He goes down to Joppa. Here's Jerusalem's right about here. Joppa's over here. And let's talk about where Nineveh is. Nineveh is over here. It's hard to see. There's a river there. The Tigris and Euphrates River, the land of Mesopotamia, right? The land between the rivers. And so Tarshish, or Nineveh's way over here. So where's Tarshish? Way over here, at our best guess. Our best guess is that Jonah, whoa, I did something wrong. That was me. I pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry. Instead of going 500 miles north and east, Jonah decides to go 2,500 miles west, all the way across the river. He's going to, and plus, these are boats that are not like modern day cruising vessels. You don't just cut across. You instead have to go over here and then sail along the coastline, cut over here, and then get up there. But see, that's the reason why he does that. The reason why he wants to go all the way to Spain and the Iberian Peninsula is because he wants to get as far away from possible as he can from Nineveh. And Tarshish is only mentioned in a couple other places, and let's look at those places. 1 Kings 10, 21 and 22. If you take notes, that's a good one to write beside this in your Bible, because it will show you exactly why he goes there. Obviously, there'll be other reasons we'll talk about, but 1 Kings 10, 21 and 22 is the one I'm going to read. If you want to also mark 2 Chronicles 9, 21, that has basically the same exact words, because Chronicles kind of restates the books of Samuel and Kings. It's restating it for a different time with different authors. But let's read 1 Kings if you're there. Verse 21. All of King Solomon's drinking cups were gold, and all the utensils of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. So Solomon, remember, God says, what do you want? Solomon says, I want wisdom, because he was a smart kid. And God said, all right, I'll give you that and everything else. Because if you have wisdom, you get everything else. Right? Now, Solomon had some issues that came along with the wisdom. He got so wealthy, he kind of corrupted even his own wisdom. But this idea is that this is showing his opulence. Everything he owned, everything he ate off of was pure gold. Not coated in gold, not had a little bit of gold in it, but was pure gold. And it says again, all of his utensils in the house of the forest of Lebanon, meaning that they took the trees from the forest of Lebanon and moved them, and that was the pillars of his house, which is again an amazing feat. There was no silver, since silver was considered nothing in Solomon's time. For the king had ships of Tarshish at sea with Hiram's fleet. And every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish would arrive bearing gold, and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. And in some translations, you could even see peacocks meaning baboons. So I don't know what that's about. I'll let you figure that out, why the baboon and a peacock are similar. I don't know. But it's interesting here, why does he mention those things? Gold and silver and ivory, we can maybe understand. Apes and peacocks are a little bit weird, but all of them show opulence, show decadence, show wealth. The ships of Tarshish that are coming, that means that these guys are traders. These guys have gone down into the heart of Africa and traded with African people and then have brought back the wealth of Africa. Over and over in Psalms and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, the authors mention the glorious ships of Tarshish, powerful sailing vessels, big enough to carry all the riches from there. The idea here is that this place that's mentioned briefly, that's talked about briefly, that is also mentioned by Akkadian traders, these other kings around in the nations around Israel, they mention Tarshish as this great and glorious trading hub over and across the sea. These places are overflowing with gold and silver and ivory and exotic animals. It's vast wealth. And you can see that if these places are vastly wealthy, if it has gorgeous weather, which southern Spain can claim to have, right? I mean, it's hot in the summer, but it's like, when I say hot, it's like 88 degrees when the sun's on you. It doesn't get too cold in the winter because it's right on the Mediterranean. Gorgeous area, which also means that the crops are going to be good, right? So if it has gorgeous weather, if it has bumper crops, guess what? People said this place must be blessed by God or by the gods, if you were of the people around Jonah. We've talked about this in James, but in the ancient world, if a person did good things, God would be with them, and they expected to be blessed. If they did bad things, God would turn his face away from them, and they expected not to be blessed. However, some started to get it backwards. In the book of Job, Job suffers loss and pain and suffering. And so his friends say, you must have done something wrong, and so God is no longer with you. The same happened to people in Job's days about places like Tarshish. You have great and vast wealth, they would say. God must be with you. When a place is wealthy and beautiful and blessed, it's God's country. Look at that. That's gorgeous. You can see, it doesn't show the full color picture up here, but the picture on my computer and on the screen back here, it shows the nice contrast, this lush, dark green trees, the beautiful landscape. I mean, this wouldn't have been there in Jonah's day, but come on, gorgeous. And this then creates the paradox in the words of the author of Jonah. See, it's funny that he says, that he pulls that out, because he says, you know, Tarshish, these people know, Tarshish is God's country. Tarshish is where the gods have smiled, where everybody's wealthy and it's overflowing with good food. No one's wanting for anything in Tarshish, right? That's the way we should look at it. That's the way we should understand it. We should expect to find God there. Jonah goes there because it has all the expectations that we would find God in that place. Jonah tried to go where he thought God should be. However, Jonah already knew that God was not there. That is not where God was. By all accounts, it seems like Tarshish should be the place where God would be hanging out. By all accounts, it seems that Tarshish should be the place where God would lead his people. Didn't God want Jonah to be happy? To experience a fulfilling life and satisfied with all of his needs? But God wasn't leading Jonah to Tarshish. Jonah wasn't called to go there. He was called to go to Nineveh. Jonah wasn't handed a ballot box where he could vote and elect where he was going as a prophet. He wasn't given a bunch of choices. Jonah was given one command: go to Nineveh and preach against it, and Jonah ran. But what Jonah didn't know, but would soon learn, and what we already know, God's love goes to the strangest of places. The comparison between Jesus and Jonah happens quite a lot. Jesus brings it up himself in his teachings. We can see that when we look at Jesus, we see sort of the perfect foil to Jonah. What Jonah does as a bad prophet is everything that Jesus doesn't do as a good prophet. And what Jonah doesn't do as a bad prophet, is what Jesus does, right? So it's very telling because Christ tells us that when we look at him, we see the Father. We see what God would do. And so God shows humanity his loves and his actions by the actions of Jesus Christ. And we need to notice where Christ goes. He is born in a manger to a young woman, and her husband is in manual labor. Then he lives most of his life in the countryside, working for his dad and taking care of his mom. And when his ministry begins, does he go straight to Jerusalem and speak to the king? Nope. He's in the countryside, the remote desert places, the barren places, not the lush green places. Instead, when he goes into the towns, and where does he go? He goes, Matthew 9 says that as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting in the tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." So he got up and followed him. So what I'm saying is he's going to the towns. He's in the town, finally. Okay, he's out of the desert places where he spends most of his time. And then he sees Matthew, the tax collector. And in verse 10 it says, "While he was reclining at the table in the house of the tax collector, many tax collectors and sinners came as guests to eat with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?' But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'Those who are well don't need a doctor, but the sick do. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners.'" Matthew is pointing out that he and his tax collecting and sinning buddies is where the love of God came. To his own messed up place in the world. Christ went to the broken, to the hurting, to the downtrodden and the desperate. That was where he was called. He went where the people didn't expect him to go, but exactly where God wanted him to be. Do you want to follow in Christ's footsteps? And do you want to do what Christ did? We must go where God is, not where we think he should be. Christ did only what he saw the Father doing, and we must do the same. Christ calls us to walk in his footsteps, and that means that we are called to all sorts of places that we may not expect. This may be, of course, that we would be called to places like Nineveh, to Iraq, to Saudi Arabia, to other places where hostilities between nations and religions create real and dangerous conflict, where the people would much rather kill you than hear your message. You may be called, however, like Paul, to a Greek world. Not hostile, but coming from a different perspective than your own. Like some friends of mine who were called to the Philippines. These may be clear callings where God speaks in a dream, or they may be built up by clues and hints from people speaking into your life for years. The point is that you must follow where God leads, wherever he takes you. But I think most important is that we recognize that he might take you here. Your calling is not, you may not get the voice coming down from heaven to speak with you. You may not get a vision and a dream of crying out in the wilderness like one of my friends had. But what you may get is that God will say, "Look at my word. Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations." When you aren't called somewhere half a world away, it's not as if you don't have a calling. Your calling is to your own neighborhood, your own street, your own community. If you aren't following the leading of God, though, if you don't listen to his calling, whether that's half a world away or right next door, if you're not listening to the leading of God, you're fleeing from the Lord's presence. Jonah thought he was running to paradise, but he was fleeing away from the Lord. That's the paradox that we see in this verse. One that we don't originally see, but we know now. He thinks he's going to where God should be, but God said no to this dark place, to the desolate place, to the place where I need you. If you're not doing that, you're fleeing from the presence of the Lord. You may not be traveling 5 times the distance in another direction, but think there are times when, because we ignore the mundane yet excellent call to our own world and our own community, we are fleeing from the presence of God. There are times where we flee from the presence of God by going to the place where we feel God should be. Sometimes we flee to church without bringing the message of the world. Sometimes we flee to family without inviting others to join in the family of God. We flee to places where we think God should be rather than the places where God already is. When I look at the mountains of North Carolina now, when I stand atop the mountains and I see the vast sea of trees, I think that's what God has done. But where God calls me is into the mucked up place below. God did an amazing thing in forming the mountains and in creating a world that is beautiful and gorgeous. But God's called us to the mucked up places below. Every single one of those fish, those car fish swimming up and down the asphalt street, every single one of those was someone that God loves desperately. And they may not know him. They may be headed down the path and their life may be a wreck. They may be wondering, how are they going to pay their bills? They may be wondering, how are they going to get through their life? They may be wondering, is today the day where I end it all? And God's called us to that place, to the dark place, to the place between the mountains, to the valley with all of its buildings and all of its people and all of its chaos, because that's where God is. He's going to the people of Nineveh, and he wants to love them. And we flee to Tarshish in our selfishness when we say, God, how could you possibly be in Nineveh? You must be in these other places. We don't tell God where he is. We follow him where he goes. So, what must you do? What must I do? What must we do as a people? Last week I told you to write out a list of people that you know personally who live nearby or who are far away that you're connected to deeply that don't know the Lord. And that list at least minimum of one person. And if you don't know anyone who doesn't know Jesus, I was asking you, please find someone. Find someone in your community who doesn't know, who doesn't have a relationship with Jesus. And pray over those people. And ask God, when you're praying, to lead you to one of them. Ask God to point you where he wants you to go. And be serious about that. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to do this because Jake said to do it, and I feel like I should probably do the homework assignment given me. But it's a thing of really say, God, I'm ready. I want you to lead me in the direction that you want. I don't want to flee anymore. I want to bring your message out there. This is not, again, when you're asking for God to lead you, it's not a, where can I give my money but not myself? Or who can I pray for? But you're supposed to be asking the question, who can I disciple? Who can I reach out to tell your message to? And just explain your love to. And look for ways, as we talked about last week, where you can pray for people. Ask them, how can I pray for you? On the people on your list, the people that you're trying to reach out to. Ask, how can I pray for you? What are ways that I can reach out to you and let you know and see and check in on how you're doing? Ask them about what they think about faith. Look for ways that you can talk to them about, and that asking is just talking. Not trying to convince them, not trying to convert them, just hearing where they come from. Hearing what their story is. Why they believe or why they don't believe. And then invite. And that could be to church, to the worship service that we have. But it could also be to dinner at your house. To say, hey, I want to just spend some time with you. And to love on you. And make a vow, finally. And maybe you don't want to make a vow. But make a commitment. Make a resolution in the new year. To not flee. Not to run. Because it could get scary, right? It could be the moment where God's saying, okay, at this point, I want you to speak to this person. They're right in front of you. They're asking you what you did yesterday on a Sunday. And you say, I went to church. It's really cool. I enjoyed it. And God said, and Jesus says, when you speak, it will not be you speaking, the Holy Spirit speaking through you. You don't have to worry about the words. Instead, just converse with someone. Don't flee. Don't say, oh, I've really got to go, I've got to go do something else. You don't want to hear about it. Because they probably do. They probably want to know more. God can work through you and in you. So make a commitment not to run when God presents opportunities before you. We're going to sing our last song. Again, what we're here for, what I'm here for, is to help you in those moments. I'm not asking small things of you. I'm asking big things because God asks big things of each of us. So it's when I'm saying you have a list and writing it out, it's actually going to do things for people. For every one of them on your list, do one of those things. I really do encourage you to continue to do that. But if you want some help, if you're thinking, I don't know what to say, I really am scared and terrified of speaking to people about faith, that's what I can help. I can try and help you get to that point. Because I can't minister to those people without you to. Jonah couldn't call on another prophet to come in and speak for him. So I would be willing to help you become the person that God wants you to be when he speaks. Help you find how God can work through you. But I want you to be able to say, I have these people in my life. So please stand and think about where you can be God's voice to the people in your life that do not know him yet. God, as we go from this place today, help us to see that you have called us to be your messengers. Lord, bring to our minds, put into our mouths, put into our paths those who need to hear your message. Give us the courage and the wisdom to engage them in a way that glorifies you and your Son. Whenever we desire to flee and run from your presence, help us to remember your Son, who showed that we don't want to go where we expect you to be, but go to where you are. Let our dedication to proclaiming your word make your church and your kingdom grow as we disciple others. In Jesus' name.